a lot of people do like to listen to what we talked about on YouTube, so now we do have the recording going. All right, so this month we had the pull of the stars, and when we voted on this a while back, I didn't have a clue what it was really about. But now we all know, right? And she is a pretty amazing writer. But from what I found out, she's Irish, of course, which is what she's writing about, but she is very highly educated. Did anyone read anything about her history? It's pretty interesting. What?
Cambridge.
Yeah, she went to school in Ireland and then Cambridge, got her PhD. Her father was something to do with literature, I believe. And then her thesis was on the friendship between men and women in 18th century English fiction. Oh, so that's kind of interesting. But then she did marry or has a life partner, Christine Ralston, who's Canadian. And because they wanted to have children, which we know this book is all about having children, right? So I think she is the one who was the mother. And they moved to Canada because because of the laws wouldn't allow them to live in Ireland with children under these circumstances. So she lives in Canada now, and she became a citizen in 2004. So with the 2 kids. So I think that's kind of interesting, and it's obviously reflected in the book quite a bit. So she's written a whole lot of things. She started writing when she was pretty young at the age of 25 and wrote a whole bunch of, the first thing apparently was called Stir Fry, but I think everyone knows her for that book Room, which was made in, I didn't read it. I know it was a huge bestseller.
Oh my gosh.
Did anyone here read it?
Yes.
Yep.
And made into a TV or movie
yes.
or something, right?
Story.
Yeah. So that's who wrote this book. And let's see. I just wanted to read here. Adele, should I read what you wrote to me?
Yeah,
Or do
you
want
can. I might add a little bit.
And also Kristen wrote to me or came in and said she couldn't make it, but she wrote her comment is she enjoyed the book very much, very descriptive characters. Maybe the main character's brother will have a purpose in life with the new baby and come out of his shell. Nurses have come a long way since then. The MD had to do the BP. Surprised what happened on the roof to each of his own. Sad the volunteer died. And Kristen herself is a nurse, retired nurse. And then Adele, I'll read yours. On the whole, I liked it, but all of the medical details sometimes seemed too much at times. I don't blame you.
Yeah.
Most interesting
Yeah.
were the characters of the 3 main women and the relationships between them. Also learning about the knowledge or lack of the pandemic when compared to the present one. A good read a century later in another pandemic time. So that's what you wrote.
Wow.
Yeah, I would add that reading that while in a hospital a century later, the contrast was stark, stark, stark. And I'm happy that I am 21st century hospitalized as opposed to 20th century Belfast hospitalized. I literally felt like a queen the way I was waited upon and taken care of. And yeah, on the whole, I enjoyed it. Come
But
in.
keep in mind, they had a war going on also, plus unrest. So
Come on in.
could I quickly show you what I found? Lori asked about a book about Kathleen Lynn, the doctor, who is a real person. And we didn't have a copy of it in our library catalog. So I went ahead and ordered it. It's on order. The title is Kathleen Lynn, Irish woman, patriot, doctor, by, I can't pronounce her last name. It's an Irish name, by a Dr. Margaret O'Hagarthane. So that book's on order if you want to look at it. But not only that, I found something, and let me quickly show you if I can share my screen here. If I can remember how to do all these things. I shared it, I put it on the library calendar where we have this book. So if you know how to get there, you go to the calendar and then the day,
Mhm,
and here's our program.
mhm.
And I put this down here, a link. This is, I'll show you quickly, we won't play it, a movie put out by the Irish Film Institute
Oh,
about this doctor.
cool.
And it's about 50 some minutes long. So if you're interested, this is a historic, a lot of the movie is in Irish, I warn you. But does everyone know how to find that link then on the library calendar underneath the title of the book? I thought you would be, for any of you that is interested, that might be a thing to go to after we're done.
Thank you.
Laura, can I ask you a question? Back to the calendar. You said the Buffalo woman was on the calendar. I didn't see it. What day was that? Do you know?
That's the next week. Well, I can show you again. Let's see, let's go back here to the library calendar. If you go, it's next week on the 13th.
Oh, okay.
Right.
It didn't say Buffalo woman. Okay.
Buffalo
Feed
Bird Woman
there.
Starting is the title of the book. And there's a Zoom link and it's available through Hoopla as a ebook, and also the Project Gutenberg with really neat
Okay.
pictures. I'd have a look at the pictures. So it's a pretty interesting story, but I'll go into another story about that next time at that meeting. I
Okay.
read in the local paper. Anyway, what did everyone think about this book? Were you glad you read it, or sorry, considering the situation?
Well, I'm gonna say after the first section of red, I felt like I'd been beat up, run over, whatever. I thought, I just couldn't imagine being in that setting, doing that work. I was wiped out. And it only continued through the next couple, like, God, what they went through. I never had a BD period, so, you know, I don't know, I know nothing, but though, what Nurse Power, boy, she was awesome. They should write a book about her. Of course, she's fictitious, so that's not gonna happen, but that's where I'm coming from.
Anyone else?
Laura, when I was reading the book, it was about the same time as we were first getting the news from the Ukraine. And they were showing pictures of the nurses who were hunkered down with the babies. And I thought, oh my goodness, you know, it seemed so real in the book because you could picture what was happening, the news feed that was coming out of the Ukraine. It was, yeah, it was kind of like, oh my goodness, we haven't gotten very far, have we? So.
It's very timely.
Yeah. And from what I read about the book, she started writing this thing before the pandemic in 2018 because it was a 100th anniversary of the influenza epidemic. And then she had just finished it when COVID hit and her publishers rushed it to print so that it came out right then. So she didn't have that in mind. And but I had the same note on my paper that not only the three subjects are war, influenza, and civil unrest, and we sure have been hit with the war and influenza for sure.
History repeats itself.
Yeah, really amazing how that happened. Plus the whole bombing of the maternity hospital. I mean, how could you plan that?
Yeah.
I have a page marked here. I thought I'll take this off for a minute. I thought
Yeah.
it was interesting in the Brown section. She said, here we are in the golden age of medicine, making such strides against rabies, typhoid fever, diphtheria, and a common influenza is beating us hollow. No, you're the ones who matter right now. Attentive nurses, I mean, tender loving care, that seems to be all that's saving lives. You know, and that is true. You know, if you are in a hospital like Adele is, or if you've been in one, nurses are the people who are really in charge. You know, the doctors may give the order, but they're not there 24/7 around the clock like the nurses are. But just the parallel lines of the storylines, And us too, thinking, here we are in the golden age of medicine. Here we are in the golden age of medicine now, 100 years later, you know, yeah, 100 years later. And
Some new virus will get them, no matter what their
yeah,
medicine
I
is.
like the respect that Dr. Lynn showed for the nurses. I don't know if it's a woman-to-woman thing, but you know, I just thought that was tremendous. And she even gave Nurse Power, you make the decisions. If she needs
Yes.
something, you give it to her. You don't have to find me.
mhm.
Just do it. I trust you.
Right, but it wasn't like that in the, when she started out. at
Oh,
Juliet.
right.
And that, I thought that was very interesting
Yeah.
too, is that as good as the nurses were and, you know, as caring, how many things that they had to, I have to get permission to give you an aspirin. I have to, they brought the whiskey and, you know, or whatever. I have to make sure that these things, but it did over time change where she was given that responsibility, and what a difference that must have made as well. Those doctors were few and far between. They weren't there every, I mean, it spread so thin that on top of everything else, well, if I can give the aspirin or if I can do those things, how much better it's going to be for the patients.
Well, and I think it wasn't every doctor that did that. It was the
Dr.
Patriot.
Lynn.
She was a little bit of a rebel, which,
Yeah.
Sure.
you know, that book will be interesting that Laura ordered.
Yeah.
Just because
Yeah.
she was a woman ahead of her time. You know, she saw things like they are now. I mean, that's really how doctor and nurse relationships are now, where you're giving, you know, this blanket order and the nurses can see fit, where way back then that wasn't the case. So,
Right. And what else is going to be interesting is the other parts of her life. You know, the
Yes.
parts about her being in the parliament and the political things, and they
Right.
came in to arrest her. And so, I mean, all of that is, you know,
fascinating.
not a sidebar or anything. It's just another part of who
She
she is.
who she was, right?
Yeah, and my feeling is with the Ukraine situation, it's one thing for us to sit here safe and in comfort and think about her being a rebel and, you know, fighting the violent side of her fight. But if you were a nurse in Ukraine right now, you wouldn't be in a position to pick and choose if you want to be violent or not. You're really under fire.
Mhm.
So it really makes it more understandable than ever in some ways, doesn't it? The whole medicine thing, everything. And I think that movie tells you a little bit about her too. I think she was originally not allowed to be a doctor in the way she ended up being, but they've also preserved all her diaries and everything, which is pretty
I
interesting.
did read that somewhere. Maybe it was the back of the book.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what does, let's see. Okay, I'll pull out. What did you think about the whole color thing that was going on? Of course, someone mentioned red to brown to blue to black, and we all know what that means now. But that was kind of a powerful way of expressing it.
Well, and then it was kind of reviewed or summed up as she watched Bridie's symptoms progress. You know,
And the other ladies who died too.
but I just mean, she said, oh, she thought that she was just flushed because she was in love. Talk about Bridie, you know, and the next day, well, that night ran into that day, and then she just thought, Nurse Power thought she just flushed, you know, and excited and whatever, and then she realized that the red is now starting to look a little muddy or something, and then there's that aha moment.
Yeah.
And we all wonder, you know, where did that flu start? I was looking into that again. They don't really know 100%, but PBS had a special on the 1918 flu a few years ago. Did anyone see that? And they think it might have started in somewhere like Kansas because of the,
Oh, I heard that story.
yeah. Do you know anything about it, Kim?
No, I was surprised.
Well, apparently when you mix animals on farms, you today we know you have to be careful because birds can transfer viruses with pigs. And in Asia, they don't necessarily take precautions, which is why so many of the flus come out of Asia. And in the early days in the United States, this is what I think I remember from the TV program. they weren't practicing things properly, and the virus was transferred, and then it went through the human population. It was brought over to Europe during the war, and then it came back here through specifically Massachusetts. I know because my grandfather was at a base in Massachusetts for World War I, training to be a pilot. And when I was researching that base, it said this is where the flu came back from Europe. So kind of interesting if it actually did start in the United States. So at least we know more about
One
it.
more awful thing we've done, not knowing about it until recently, but.
And yeah, I looked up some articles. They're figuring out the specific DNA of the virus, so they can figure out, by taking samples from people. And it's amazing. We are at a high point of science and medicine, but they still don't know exactly how it happened. So. So-
I was thinking about the relationship that the nuns, the sisters, had with the nurses. And I guess one of the thoughts that came to my head is, well, it certainly isn't like the television show called The Midwife, is it? The way they portrayed the nuns, they weren't quite the same.
Oh, yeah, that phrase Bridie used about they go in the pipeline.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, wasn't that heartbreaking? Remember the pipeline? Yeah. And then later you find out that the kids at the mother house where there were no mothers, that the kids would be assigned to take care of a child, and if the child was noisy or was sick, then it would be taken out on the older child who was caring for them. I'm appalled. I don't like history.
No, I make a connection with that too, because the way I felt about, Bridie's background and so forth. And then I'm thinking, well, here's another connection now, because I think that the Pope just apologized about some treatment with Indigenous people in Canada. And I'm saying, well, here it is now. It's a whole 100 years later.
Yeah.
And there
Things
seems to
are
be,
just coming out.
that's another connection.
Wasn't a lot of this coming out already about Ireland? What was that, Philomena? Did anyone see
Oh,
that
yeah.
movie?
And the
Wasn't that? What was it?
The Magdalene Sisters was another film that was about that situation where the
Yeah.
unwed were, basically enslaved.
Yeah, I saw that. They've made one of those, it was a laundry kind of thing, and the
Yeah.
women had to work there. And it certainly was talked about very clearly in the book. And they've made is it a museum or a memorial of some sort out of the last of those buildings that's left, the Magdalene. I
And
think
where
they
is
I think
know
they
where
called them Magdalenes because they regarded those pregnant, unmarried women as fallen women like Mary Magdalene.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it took me a little bit to figure that out.
Well, religion does play a large part in this. I did read that Emma Donoghue was raised as a Protestant. So I don't know, does that influence what she wrote, or is it the history that influences it? Did anyone see the movie Belfast?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Very good. Very good movie.
Yeah, I'll be showing it later
I
too.
think it's,
Yeah.
you have it this summer.
Recommended.
I have it on the list for later. I did
Oh,
see it
yes.
myself, and it plays, that's the whole trouble that they had in the 60s, late 60s. The fighting between the Protestants and Catholics in Belfast at that time.
Yeah.
Did any of you participate in the Northern Children's Program where we brought kids from Belfast through the
No.
summer? I mean, we had a girl for a couple of summers in a row and other families, took in these children out of Belfast to give them a different
Environment.
and different summer experience than being in the troubles.
What years was that? Was that recent?
It was not, we had a child in 1981 and 82. Those were and they had started a year or so before. for here in Sturgeon Bay.
I see. Yeah. You don't hear too much about it anymore, but it was really bad in the 70s and 60s when that movie takes place. I'd recommend the movie for anyone who can't come to the library to see it.
When is it showing at the library?
July 28th.
July 28th.
Oh, right.
Oh.
I'm putting it on the calendar.
It's on our library calendar. It should be.
But it'll be here July 28th.
Yeah.
And I think Kenneth Branagh just didn't he win one of the Academy Awards?
Yeah, I'm not sure if he won or not, but his family was Protestant, I think, and then, you know, there was the fighting and the street kids and everything, and eventually his family went to England to escape the violence.
I know that, Kevin.
The Belfast movie.
Belfast, right.
Yeah, Kenneth.
Yeah, Kenneth,
But not him in real life.
I think it is.
Yes, in real
it's
life.
Biographical.
It
I
is
think so.
biographical. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. So it's really worth watching, and it does cover a similar situation. It's really too bad. What can you say? What
Well, I
can
think
you
it's
say?
too bad too that there was a message out there. What did they say? If your husband, you don't love your husband unless you have 12 children.
right.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Oh, man.
among all the rest of this, I'm thinking about, oh my gosh, that mentality. But there it was.
I
And
just read that in another Irish book.
Yeah.
Where the man says about how all his friends had 10, 12 brothers and
Yeah.
sisters, but he only had 3. But he liked the room. He liked the freedom that he had without having 2 times more of kids. Irish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is anyone here Irish heritage, and can you explain to us why that was important? I've heard big families were important here for farming,
Farming, yeah.
and that makes some sense.
Well, they had big families, but they didn't all survive.
Yeah,
Yes.
So
that's
You
true
had-
too.
you kept having them for survival of some of them, and in some cultures it was, you had to have those children to take care of you if you managed to get older,
Hmm.
because there weren't, social systems set up to help you when you were aging.
Yeah, each country has, or each culture has its own social dynamic.
Yeah, because, you could say it was because of their Catholic heritage, but there are other cultures that also have children
Hmm.
for the same reasons, so it's just not one reason.
Yeah. Well, what did what did you think about the brother? I thought for sure he was going to meet Bridie, but
Me too.
Yeah.
I thought the same thing in the beginning.
yeah, in the beginning.
Yeah.
And that she would cure him of his trauma.
We must be hopeless romantics.
Yeah, I guess so.
I think it was typical of what you read about World War One. What's the word? Come on, yeah, they come back, they call them veterans.
Shell shock.
I was just thinking about the true of veterans. In fact, there is let's see, and also many times I read about how when you see this supposedly healthy, fairly young man walking around the streets during a war, but they are scorned. Like she talked about, you didn't get vegetables thrown at you again today, did you? That they're wondering why they are there. And if I can just read one quote, because I'm going to tell you about a commercial on TV that just brings me to tears every time, and it really relates to this.
Hmm.
So many veterans had come back damaged goods, though they had to scratch on their bodies, only invisible bruising of the mind. And there is a Volunteer of America's commercial. And I watch very little TV, but I do watch golf, and you see it all the time. And maybe you've seen it. It's like a young man in an army jacket, and he's got a crew cut and dark circles under his eyes, and he looks really rough. And he's crossing the street, and he runs into himself. And there's this big battle that goes on. And at the end of the commercial, they separate and go apart. It's really hard. It's really hard to watch. And the only words in it are, moral injury is a war inside. No one should fight alone. And that just really hits me when I think of all the needy people today. And I thought of Tim or Tom, or what his name is, how he is inside
Mhm.
and not being able to fight it or get help to get past it. I just.
Didn't they have a white feather
Yes,
movement? I've read other books where
In
they did
England,
that, and they were
yes.
very, the women would go up to
young women would give the
indiscriminately
man
and they
a
took
white
a lot of,
feather.
yeah.
It was a sign of cowardice because
Yeah.
they weren't in the war and they would shame them.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh
wow.
my
Yeah.
gosh.
There's a book, Maisie Dobbs.
Maisie Dobbs,
White feather.
yes. Birds of a feather,
Birds
yes,
of a feather, yeah, yeah.
absolutely. So that, I've come across that before, and they took a lot of heat for that because they don't know the background story
Right.
of the person who
Right.
was there, so.
Wow. Rush to judgment.
Yeah,
And what do you think about this book? She was able to do a lot of things independently. Like, what about taking that child and just walking out? What about that? Well, it's crazy that the child had no future to start with, but we all sort of empathize with her taking the child. But how was she going to live in the future? What was her plan there? Was
She
she,
was only taking a week's leave.
Yeah. didn't she think
No,
her
I thought
brother
she
would take?
quit.
Yeah, was she quitting or?
Well,
I think
one
that's.
point is
yeah.
that
Yeah,
she was taking
yeah.
a week's leave. So she was probably gonna go back to work.
And leave the child?
didn't she
in
think
care?
her brother was gonna
Her
step
brother
up?
would
Go ahead.
take
Yeah,
care.
exactly, that he would step up, that this would bring him out of it, and,
She said he's-
yeah.
he's kind heart. And she thought it would be healing for him.
Yeah.
However, with what was happening in the country between the flu and the war, and because the child wasn't wanted anyway, probably the whole thing, it'll just pass. You know, really, what was happening, what was going on. There was a lot of confusion, it seemed to me, in the book. A lot of, I think she could very realistically get away with doing that, yeah.
Yeah, me too, because who else is gonna step up besides that?
And it's
No.
fiction.
It is fiction.
Yeah.
Yes, it is fiction.
And Nun was walking off with the baby.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wanted to tackle her.
I liked the part about where they explained what the title meant. I wrote it down. In one part, it said the pull of the
Yes.
stars meant that
Yes.
the heavens were governing the people's fate. And I thought that was kind of a neat a way of expressing it, the pull of the stars. I thought, yeah.
The influenza,
Say it again?
that influenza, the Italian word, which I never made that connection, that it mean influence, you know?
Yeah.
That was very, I mean, that goes all the way back to Shakespeare, you know?
And earlier, yeah.
Earlier, the Greeks.
Mhm. That was kind of neat.
One thing I have to compare this to Belfast. In Belfast, they had so much trouble. Here you have this family living in this really violent situation with all these thugs threatening them. And they have so much trouble leaving Ireland because of family connections.
Mm.
So in this case, the sister and the brother are kind of loners. You wonder why they can't, I guess the whole England was in bad shape too because of the war. So it's not like they could escape easily. But what would you do if you were in Ukraine right now?
Difficult.
To Poland.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very difficult, yeah.
some of those countries are not so friendly surrounding that area.
I think then too, back in the time of the book, there was more sense of loyalty. They thought more loyalty and just kind of sticking around and maybe not knowing better. And the people who did leave were probably more of the rebels. And nowadays, I think we realize that, it just gets to be the point where it's a safety thing. I mean, so many people were staying, a lot of physicians and nurses and stuff. A lot of people were staying. Nowadays, I'm talking about Ukraine.
Mhm.
But I think we realize that we do have options if we would want to leave. Where here, it was, I think, the opposite. more loyal, a few left. And now it's more leaving, a few stay, maybe, do you think? I don't know.
Well, the potato famine, I think,
Yeah.
drove out at least a third of the population
Wow.
of Ireland over a period of, a decade or so. And, like some of these people, what were their options to leave? I mean, they didn't have resources.
Right.
Well, people to
places
go
get
to.
anywhere. And transportation was a much bigger issue.
The potato famine was before World War I.
1845.
Yeah.
1840s.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of Irish
Yeah.
immigrants, and they were not treated very well here either, to be honest,
No.
right? There's lots of movies and books about
Well,
that
and
too.
Titanic, look at Jack had to go on the, lowest, got on board, but,
Yeah, people are mean everywhere.
yeah.
Can be.
And I thought we were pretty stable until recently. It just seems like this whole war has blown things up again. Like World War I and II. So it is amazing she was writing this book during, pointing out those things, and then they all came out in the news.
Well, you almost gotta wonder, because I just see one quote I've written down here. I said, I wrote 1960 compared to today. We all live in an unwalled city globally, a web of human traffic that connects. That's before the internet, people. I thought that was a good thing. I think she's a very lovely writer. The whole book was excruciating for me. In the hospital, and these babies helping these babies being born. You can enlighten me if you want, but she had really. Here's one. Dublin was a great mouth, old with missing teeth. And she was referring to all the closed shops in the business, but I like that description. And here's one that I had, she said, Nurse Julia Power said, it was a certain relief to having had it already. I think we got to that point. I mean, I don't think I had it, but I think it was like everybody's going to get it. And once you got it, if you survived intact, healthy, you were relieved you finally got it. Maybe, I don't know.
Would you read another book of hers?
Yeah.
I think I would, but I don't believe I could ever read Rome. And when I found out that she was Irish, I was shocked. This is how dumb I am, I guess, that an Irish woman could write a book like Rome. And I'm going, what the heck? That stuff happens in Ireland. It's not just in the United States. Aren't you talking? Is that what you?
I'm talking about, about
Rome.
Rome. Yeah, it is difficult, but I'm telling you, it's so impactful.
Well, I know. I have a friend who told me that, but I don't think I could.
In what way do you mean impactful?
I don't want to give too much away for people who haven't read the book, but the 5-year-old tells that story, and just that an adult could be a 5-year-old and write as clearly as she did. And then after everything that mother and son had been through, and like what happened, how it resolved itself or what happened at the end, I thought it was amazing. But I had to read the book in parts just because, especially at the beginning, and when you're figuring out what's happening with this mother and son, it's really like jaw dropping. But it was an excellent.
Well, I guess that makes her a really good writer if she can write it believably from a 5-year-old point of view.
Cross genres.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that's what ties the two together also. The author can bring out those emotions. I mean, I must have read Room, what do you think? It's 15 years ago? I don't know, it's a long time. And I can still remember so much of it. So it really did impact me. So, and I think this book will be the same, even though I agree with Adele that I didn't want to know a lot of that medical stuff. But the emotion of it, the way she can bring tie your emotions to her character's emotions, I think, great author that way.
I agree.
But I think it brings to light the fact of just thinking back for those of us who did have children, just how delicate that whole process is, even still today. I mean,
Mhm.
even 30 years ago, but even now, like, now that my children are thinking about having children, and it's just like, oh my gosh, there's just so much that can go wrong. And reading it just makes you just so happy that you're not in that decade of your life anymore. You know, I don't know, that's how I felt, because it was scary enough when I had my own children, and then reading back out of, all the different things that could just go wrong.
You know, all of us are women, and I have to say, at the same time, I had to sit back and say, being a woman is really an amazing thing.
Yeah.
There's nothing like it.
Right.
We have a different point of view. As women.
Well, one of the things that I think the orderly was talking about, the male character, when he brought
Mhm.
somebody in, he was talking about how they paid the blood tax, and then the irony of
Yeah,
that the men had paid a blood tax, but the women didn't have to pay that, and the irony of her having women bleeding to death right there.
Mhm.
And she pointed that out to him, which I liked. She called him on it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that whole scene of the type O blood, that's universal donor, and the reaction to that,
The art-
that was pretty horrible. I just couldn't imagine being Julia sitting there, going from one person to the other. How does that work? You know, where's the sterilization and all these things that we do
Yeah.
today?
right.
They
How
didn't have-
they tried, go ahead. How they tried to figure out, like, the girl would come in, I have no idea how long I've been pregnant, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how
They
I got
tried to figure this out by
don't-
listening
I
and
don't know how the baby comes out, does it pop out
your
navel?
navel.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
Yeah.
just, but then I thought, well, my mom, whose mother never told her
yeah,
anything, she
Yeah.
says. And you read books like that where all of a sudden a girl is menstruating and she thinks she's dying and she doesn't know what to do.
yeah.
I mean,
I was
Yeah.
thinking that one young girl in here, the one who ended up dying,
Friday.
not
Oh,
her,
the-
the pregnant,
Pregnant,
the pregnant one,
new-
that they,
new-
I was thinking she was probably abused by her father. I really don't think, didn't you kind of think that? Or,
Yeah,
By
and
someone.
then very quiet and not saying anything about her condition or how it was like that, but then that was her second
Yeah.
baby, and then she kept getting sent to that home, and how is that allowing that to happen? But it sort of alluded to that, but it never was outrightly stated. But I sort of had that feeling.
and the one whose husband was wanted lots of kids, and you could tell it came out slowly that she was being abused. Which one was that? I forget the name.
The one that started with the D, Delia or something. Or
Yeah, I have Delia Garrett. Yeah, I tried to get a character list.
Yeah.
Well, Mrs. O'Reilly though, too.
Yeah.
When they had a baby, she was being abused and, by her husband.
Yeah, and she's
17
17 years old.
Yeah.
First baby, and she was the one who didn't know much.
and you
Yeah.
remember Dr. Lynn said if she had her way, there'd be no welding before the age of 20, which I happen to think is young, but
Did you see they're taking away the marriage age in one of the states?
What?
one of our states.
Get away.
Oh.
They're raising it, or they're.
They're
taking it away
eliminating it from the
entirely.
law.
Eliminating.
Is it one of the central southern states over on the coast? Which one? It's in the news right now.
So they're saying you can get married at any age? Is that what you're saying?
Missouri, maybe?
That's apparently they're just eliminating an age so
Oh.
that there's a lot of controversy about it. I don't know the details. You have to look it up, but that can happen here. I mean, traditionally, people were abused at young ages in some places.
It's Tennessee.
Okay, there you go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ardell.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is maybe, gosh, 30, 40 years ago now. Oh, good Lord. while I was still teaching for starters, but I remember there was a kind of a Western central state that finally took the law off, you know, the good old saying rule of thumb. The rule of thumb was that you could beat your wife with a stick as long as it wasn't bigger than your thumb. So I don't know if they're still doing it, but they finally took it off.
Yeah.
off the books.
Well, in the last book we read too, there's another girl. What was she, 13 also?
Oh,
Remember that one? The girl with the louding voice?
Oh, yeah.
fantastic book, yeah.
Yeah. So what can you say?
Well, how about you can say
Yeah.
something? Listen to this. This is guilt was the sooty air we breathed these days. I just think that's gorgeous.
Yeah, you're very good at getting
And
those.
here's another one. Can't you just see this? She's walking it down, you know, it's looking at the buildings and things have fallen in disrepair. And she says, you really got to think about this, but I have a reason why it impacts me. The serifs, sans serif, the serifs were tipped with soot. Can't you see, like, it was on, I think, the name of the hospital? So it must have been in raised letters, and so it says the serifs, which is that little curly thing on the bottom were tipped with soot. I love things like that. I just,
When you think of the
It's so
environment,
good
at
layer.
that time, they were.
Cold.
Cold.
Yes.
yes.
So there's a lot.
A lot of soot, yeah. Nurse Julia said, my job wasn't to cure them, it was to cure her, it was to bring her safe through this calamity, push her little boat back in the current of what I imagined to be her barely bearable life.
Yeah, terrific writer.
It was a great writer.
Yeah.
I think, does she have a brand new book just out? Or am I confusing her?
I'm gonna go to Fantastic Fiction right now and find out.
The author who has a brand new book out is the one, Station 11. She's got a brand new
Oh,
one.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Hilary Mantel.
Whatever. Some, yeah.
St. John Mandel, yeah.
I had it
What-
wrong.
What did you think of Bridie as a character? Did you like her? She was a cheerful person. Did the relationship between the two women ring true to you? Or what did everyone think of that?
I'd rather just talk about Bridie a little, because I thought Bridie just embraced every single thing. She was so grateful for every single thing. She was grateful, I think, for being treated as a human being that had some worth. And that was what she said to her on a
Mm-hmm.
rooftop was, you see me as worthy, or something like that. I just, and a little description where she's in the bathroom and she has running warm water and a little tissue of paper to use.
Yeah.
You know, and I say, boy, am I pampered. Wow.
Yeah.
I already knew I'm pampered, so, you know, I thought she was amazing. I thought she was very intelligent. You know, she would do what she was told, and she would ask questions. I think she's the one who said, doesn't it pop out of your belly button? I can laugh because I know it.
I kept having hopes for her, like she
I
was
did
going to
too.
become a nurse. She would be
Yeah.
inspired.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
I
did
thought that.
too.
I didn't think she was gonna die. for crying out loud.
Yeah.
And she got killed off,
Yes.
making it all the more tragic.
Became, the nurse and Bridie became involved,
Yeah.
I mean, this whole book is in 3 days.
Yeah.
Yeah,
circumstances.
that's,
So it's really compressed.
Yes.
yeah,
But, I just thought probably the author did that for her own feelings to bring something in.
Yeah.
Another aspect of life.
Yeah.
Rather than that, this would really make you think that would be what would happen so fast, so quickly.
yeah, I thought the arc, that's exactly what I was feeling. The arc of the story was a little bit off. Because it was like, she's gonna bring her home to meet Tim and, or whatever.
Yeah.
Or she's gonna become a nurse, and then all of a sudden, as you say, within such a short time, they formed this relationship one time on the roof and then she's dead. And so the whole thing just didn't take time to play out very well.
But I think that that's a part of the insecure way that was at that time with the illness. You
Yeah.
could be fine in the morning and gone in the afternoon, and other people survived it if they went this long. And I think that maybe that was just a part of showing us that, yeah, you'd hope for a happy ending, or you'd hope that she'd be okay, but this could happen to anybody. And
Mhm.
she was there in the hospital, and boom, down she went. The author does have a new book coming out in August, Haven, Haven, and it's going to be 7th century Ireland. A scholar and a priest take off. They take 2 monks with them and found a monastery in a bare island inhabited by tens of thousands of birds. They claim it for God, and in such a place, what will survival mean? So something very different.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Here's a quote from Brady. These have been the 2 best days I've ever had. You've made me mad.
Linda said, I'm sorry, Linda, I didn't see the note until just now.
I don't
she-
know
you're
if it's just
having
me,
trouble-
but the folks in the back of the room, I have a hard time hearing them. I don't know if the other people on Zoom have troubles too.
The sound is,
Echoing.
Got it turned way up.
I'm not sure which thing I have the sound being picked up by, which machine. That's part of it. I'll have to test this a little better next time before the meeting. Because
Well,
there's
and
so
I
many
realize-
hookups.
Yeah, and I realize that you have to sit spread out. I think in the future, if people can be closer together, it would help, but I understand the situation is what it is, yeah.
So you can speak loudly. Yeah,
We got the gist of it. We get the gist of it.
yeah.
Nurse Power says, I seem to have stumbled into love like a pothole in the night. Not that poetic, but we understand what she means, you know.
They had potholes back then too.
I just thought about life too, like you're not dead because you're 100% alive.
Yes.
Can you write that down? Otherwise
Can you hear this at all?
Something about life, and that was all I got.
100% something.
You must be half dead, not even 1%. We're all 100% alive.
Yes, how Bridie looked at life.
Okay.
I said that quote to one of my friends the other day, you know, when you're feeling a little bit down and out of it and stuff, it's just like, you know, that's such a great way to look at it, is that.
Yeah.
Does this sound any better?
Well, they can hear you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we won't know, and it's the back part of the room.
You're close to the mic.
You're too close to the mic, do they say?
Oh, Laura's close. We can hear her.
Yeah.
You want it closer to Laura?
No, Laura comes through loud and clear. It's the back of the room.
It's fine.
It's
Can
fine.
you hear us better now with the microphone moved?
Yes,
little bit.
seems to
Who
be.
is-
Sing a
yeah.
song and we'll tell you. Go ahead. I'm only kidding.
Oh, come on.
Oh, well. Anyway,
It's all good.
we got
Where
gist of it.
Her education from, I'm not sure I remember that.
Say again?
What don't you remember?
Get her education from?
Oh,
Oh,
Anyone
don't-
know?
the author?
Presume that it was some sort of nursing school in Dublin area.
Because she really seemed to be educated pretty well for that time, and the fact that she seemed to be not, she didn't seem to have any family experience with giving birth or having a mother around to help or
I'm gonna tell you,
sisters or.
the way she performed with helping the birth of these babies, I thought, had she been given a chance, she could have been a doctor.
She had the nerve.
I think technically she was a midwife
Oh,
nurse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you might. that
It
might be-
says right here, my father had stumped up the fees for the full 3-year course at the technical school for nurses. And I've been
Okay.
sent here for ward work 3 afternoons a week. So, but yeah, mostly when they're midwives, they learn that sort of thing on the job and from other women. There's not really a midwifery school
Well,
back then, right? It was learned the trade as passed on to other women, technically, right?
but she,
But this, but here it said she did go to school.
And you wonder if that doctor, the real Dr. Lynn, doesn't provide some of the background for some of this training too.
sure.
What was her real background? I don't know.
Well, and before Julia was assigned to the fever ward, she was upstairs with the other nuns in the maternity ward, wasn't she? Wasn't she just given that duty in the fever ward, like when she got there that day? Or really recently?
Or she
Yes.
was overnight or something. She was left alone or something like
Right.
that.
Or that, I think she was upstairs with the other nuns because she knew the other nuns.
Yeah, I
What
think
they
she-
were doing, so. Anyway.
Are you glad that you read this book during a pandemic?
I'm glad I'm not pregnant.
God. Been
Yeah, I
there.
thought that was great reading it during the pandemic. A lot of
I thought
parallels.
it, yeah, it gave you parallels
Mhm.
to consider. You know, even with the start of the current epidemic, there was a lot that was unknown. It's just that our knowledge has increased such that we were able to learn a lot more, a lot faster than they were back then.
Mhm.
They have a lot of different kind of resources. And there had been a lot of research done on these coronaviruses, you know, prior to starting for the new vaccine. So it wasn't starting from ground zero. The background was there for developing them.
I can't remember, did this book mention vaccines at all?
Yes,
I thought there
Dr.
was
Lynn talks
something-
about it.
I thought I remember there was a little bit
There
or
is.
something that they were.
Yeah, there was a
trying
little
or-
bit, and she said it won't happen until we have the microscope to be able to isolate.
That's, yeah.
Because they
the-
didn't know at that
That's
time
it.
that it was viruses.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What about smallpox though? Wasn't that quite a bit earlier?
Yeah.
Smallpox was earlier and they learned how to vaccinate for that. I mean, so they knew about vaccination, but the methods were a lot different and the understanding of what they were doing was different.
If
mean,
any
we
of you,
flu.
if any of you watched the Ben Franklin, Ken Burns' first 2 hours last night, there was some discussion there about the death of one of Franklin's children. And he blamed himself because he knew about the smallpox vaccine, but he had not had his child inoculated. And he blamed himself all the rest of his life. So the smallpox vaccine was available to those at least who knew about and were willing to give it clear back in the 1700s.
You are
Amazing.
exactly right. I just finished reading about Catherine the Great, biography, and she got the vaccine in around
Uh-huh.
the Revolutionary War time and heard about it. And then she did, and then she had her children and grandchildren inoculated as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Benjamin Franklin had been inoculated for smallpox.
Incredible.
Yeah, it is.
Well, just think how many of us probably had the vaccination, but then even within a generation, they stopped
They
doing it
stopped.
because it was basically eradicated.
Yeah.
But the viruses that we're talking about with influenza, they keep mutating.
Yeah.
And people don't seem to have a very good understanding of that.
Mhm. No, they don't.
Wasn't it smallpox that wiped out so many of the indigenous tribes because It was,
Yeah.
it had no immunities to it at all. And that,
Right.
I remember
Yeah.
reading about that too. Yeah. And that was about that same time, the 17.
Yep.
And that's part of that book, the Buffalo Bird Woman's
Yeah.
Garden.
Yeah.
Those tribes were like halved, or even a third of the people were left.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
So they actually combined tribes because so many people died from smallpox
Yeah.
in those days. But yes,
By the way, the microphone is much better when you moved it where you moved it.
Yes.
So just so you know, for the future, it's better.
I chose a different microphone too, so I think that made the big difference.
There you go. We're techies, we'll get this.
Will some of you be back here then at the next one in May? Are you
I
coming back?
will. I'll be back in May.
June.
June, May?
I saw the snow is gone. That's a good start, or at least most of it.
No, we had some more.
Oh
Yeah.
dear, oh dear. Anyway.
We'll be glad to see you back here.
Well, my phone just beeped and gave me a tornado warning, so the
Yeah,
storms are heading this way.
and the pouring rain is yeah, we have a big rainstorm. Anyway, yeah.
Well, we're an hour now, so we can end and you can go hide out.
Yes. So thank you, Laura, for letting us zoom in.
Thanks, Laura.
Everybody,
Thank you.
see you next month.